Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to next in the series of the ISE podcasts. I'm joined today by a great panel of experts, and we're going to be talking about virtual internships, virtual placements, and virtual experience. So a really hot topic at the moment for everybody. We've got a lot of people on the webinar. I can see the numbers ratcheting up very quickly. We're sort of almost 300 people now, and I think we had about 460 registered. So I'll give you just a little bit of background into how our webinars work if you've not joined one before. I will very shortly hand over to Jane, who's going to chair the session. If you've got any questions as we go through, please use the questions box that you'll see on the webinar tool. With so many on the call, to actually use voice, I think sort of talking over each are going to be a bit unmanageable. So pop the questions in there, and I will feed those back into the panelists at the appropriate time. Like all our webinars, this records automatically, and that will be sent to you at the end of the webinar. So if there's a bit you missed, you can catch up, or if you want to circulate it to other people in your teams because you think they would benefit from the insights, then please do. So without further ado, I suggest we get cracking, and I'll hand over to you, Jane, if you'd like to get us started.
Fab, thank you, Steve. Just a quick introduction. I'm lucky enough to be a freelance consultant working in the entry-level talent space. I've been in that space for about 25 years, and I'm currently working for Henry Davis and the 106 Comms team. 106 Comms are a brand and engagement agency, and they're focused on helping organisations to tell their brand stories. And I guess, you know, what stories will we all have in the next few years? I'm sure we'll all remember this time, hopefully for all the right reasons. But obviously COVID has accelerated change in our industry hugely. I mean, as I said, I've been in this industry for 25 years, and I've never seen organisations make decisions so quickly and pivot so readily. Timings wise, the lockdown has really forced us to act decisively about our various opportunities for students, whether that be a spring vacation opportunity or summer work experience or industrial placements. So I guess the audience has probably joined today because they're possibly thinking about what are the options open to me as an organisation. Should I carry on? Should I stop altogether? It's just too difficult. I can't even conceive of how we could possibly as an organisation run our programmes, or should we delay them? And obviously there'll be a huge impact on any one of those three decisions for our talent pipelines, for our brands, for our commitment to the next generation of our workforce, and also specifically for underrepresented talent. So there's lots of questions, I'm sure, to come from the audience. I'm going to take each of our panelists in turn and ask a couple of pre-prepared questions. I've had conversations with all the panelists over the past few days, and I'm delighted to be joined by Helen, by Yasmina, by Phil, by Liz, and also by Tonya from TJ Consulting. So we've got IBM represented today, Clifford Chance, Aon and EY. So thank you so much for giving up your valuable time today to join us. As Steve said, please use the question box. I think it's not at the bottom of our screen. I think it might be at the top of your screen, and hopefully we'll get through all of those questions today. Some of you on the webinar may have been part of the previous webinar an hour ago run by Ollie Sidwell, so we possibly might look at combining some of the questions that came from the audiences, try to do a little bit more collaboration in this space and post some of the answers if we don't get through them all this afternoon. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Helen, IBM's School Leaver and University Placement Scheme lead, to give us an overview of what IBM are doing in terms of the modifications to their student work experience programmes.
Thanks, Jane. Where possible, we're trying not to modify anything, but realistically, all of our placement students that we have with us at the moment, they're all working from home. So the good news is that proves that placements can be done remotely. And of course, that's great for our task managers and the businesses that they're supporting. So we're looking to continue that as best as possible. but we're very conscious that the students have exam changes, they've got travel restrictions. Some of them are international students who might not be able to get back into the UK to start their role in the summer. So that's causing a few challenges. But basically, we have contacted all of our students directly, the ones that are yet to be onboarded, and said, the role is still there. Do you still want it? Because of course there will be some people that just cannot take up the place, but where possible we're trying to facilitate that they do, and that might be accommodating changes to their degree requirements, actually sitting exams later for some of them, because we have, for our school leavers as well as university, we need to accommodate those, and we also need to accommodate the travel restrictions. So we're going to start all our placements virtually until our locations are actually open again, and then as soon as they are, we're going to be bringing them into the office, because one of the big advantages of doing a placement that 99% of students feedback is that the thing that they can't learn at university are those soft skills, the business tenacity, the understanding of people politics, and you need to do the face-to-face to actually be able to do that.
Fantastic. So at the point of making a decision around what you were going to be doing with your work experience programs, Helen, can you talk to us a little bit about what your options were at that point, and how did you go about making a business case for carrying on?
The business case for carrying on was quite simple, in that we've still got a business that we need to deliver, and our students add such value to IBM that, where possible, the roles will still continue. So we carried on our recruitment as normal. We've just done our final hiring sprint and filled the roles that we have open. So really pleased to have hit that milestone. So what we did is we've been having calls with all of our global team, so 170 countries, all hopping on a call to talk about their strategies for their placement students, making sure that we have an aligned process, making sure that we're all trying to do the same sort of offering. There will be some roles that you just can't deliver remotely when clients require face-to-face on premises and security requirements. So those haven't been able to be done. And we have a couple of programs that are starting just summer placements, and we know that it's still unforeseen what's going to happen, say in June. So what are we going to do? Well, let's do them virtually. So with summer research projects with our R&D departments, they are being run virtually, and they're quite good because they're project-based things rather than business as usual delivery. So it's quite easy to run those remotely.
And what changes have you made to those project-based summer placements? Have you shortened the week, for example?
No, same duration, it's still happening. So definitely in the UK, that's what's happening. Can't speak for all of the geographies, but in the UK, our IBM Extreme Blue program is still carrying as normal, but just not face-to-face. And okay. I'm sure as soon as the location opens, if there is the opportunity to bring the students in, then that will happen. However, of course, there's student accommodation, which a lot of them won't have organised because they'll be staying at home rather than being nearer the location itself.
Right. And what would you say your biggest challenge has been over the last couple of weeks in terms of, slightly shifting the emphasis in terms of these programmes?
Just making sure that all the stakeholders are aware of what's happening. So most importantly, it's communicating to the students and then communicating to the task managers, whilst all the time trying to be flexible, because it's all about ensuring that the student needs are met and the business needs are met, and juggling that all the way whilst making sure that we don't overpromise, because there's nothing worse you can do. But we found that by being honest with the students, and just being open with them, and as I say, our recruitment team phoned them all directly, no mass email to all the new students that are coming on board, just to make sure they're okay, especially the students that are, you know, based not in the UK. You know, what are your worries? And capturing all of those questions means we can address it in, you know, one way.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that message came out, you know, quite loudly, didn't it, from the previous webinar, around that being, students want organisations to be flexible. They just want some level of experience, and actually it's not necessarily, they're not too bothered that it's going to change, or the way that it's being delivered is changing. They're just so desperate for that opportunity, for that experience. So
and I'm really aware that a lot of the universities, you know, there is a requirement that a placement is at least this long. And, you know, if we have the need later on in the season for more roles, then if we can open up for 6 or 9 month placements instead of the full year, as long as that fulfills the university requirements and the business, if we have the go ahead for those, then of course, you know, we will be fulfilling those roles as well.
Yeah, fantastic. So thank you for that, Helen. That's fantastic. Steve, has there been any questions that have come through that we haven't answered?
Yeah, just one question at the moment from Norman and T-Side. I think you covered this, Helen, but it's probably worth just reiterating. And that was actually, Norman was wondering actually the impact on placement. So the actual number of students you're bringing through the same, and also do you expect your graduate hiring numbers to be the same this year?
Year on year, we're at exactly the same level as we were last year for the numbers in the doors with offers out. So yeah, we're quite pleased with that.
Great. Thank you so much, Helen. That's fab.
So actually, just hold on, sorry, just that I think that's prompted a few more to chuck some questions on very quickly. So Helen, have all your vacancies been filled? That's one of the questions. So are you still wanting students to apply, or your program's full at the moment?
So we're really lucky. Last year we launched a sprint process where we only open when we've got roles to fulfill, rather than like doing one mass recruitment campaign at the very beginning. So we opened our last sprint in February. We completed that, so that's all the way from application process through to interview, and we changed the way that we did the interviews as well. So rather than doing face-to-face assessment centres, we did a more stringent interview process, and all of the roles that were yet to be fulfilled at that time, we've had 35 offers out since then. So yeah, as I say, all of our roles are filled at the moment. If that changes, then we'll open on the website again and contact any of the students that have already been through process.
I'll probably come back to the end, Jane, and just talk about some of our insights into the overall graduate markets rather than go off a tangent. But just a couple more questions here, and it's around, Helen, actually how I think this has kind of worked from a technology point of view. So it's around how have you actually been able to onboard them virtually, and also how have you been able to sort of connect them and get those networks forming, which we know are important for new hires.
We open a Slack channel, so as soon as we know when students are coming in, we get them all collaborating, so get that networking starting straight away. And it's not just based on start date, it's based on base location. So if you've got students based up in Greenock, we connect them all together, and the same for Hursley, South Bank, and all of our locations. So you've immediately got that collaboration happening to try and get the teaming, and we've always done that. So, you know, we're just persisting with that, and we'll be making sure that so the students are talking to each other as well as us, and we're making sure that they're all happy and pointing in the right direction. The physical onboarding, so laptops. So we supply all of our students with their own laptop rather than having them rely on their own technology, because, you know, there are some people that just don't have kit that's required for the job. So we make sure that they've got that hardware that they need to be doing the job, and we will be making sure they've got that before they're supposed to join, and we'll be doing the onboarding virtually. So most of the modules for our inductions, we're going to be pre-recording, we're going to be doing some live sessions, we're going to be using Trello boards and Mural and Kahoot quizzes and all of those sort of interactive elements to make sure that our audience are as engaged as possible, but, you know, remotely. But we're going to make sure that the material is exactly as it would be if we were doing a face-to-face induction, so that when we do flip over actually to doing it on premise, then it will be the same feel and experience for the students that we've actually physically met and the ones that we haven't.
Great, thanks, Helen. Just another couple of comments here, actually not questions, from some universities that are on the call, saying that they're working quite hard with academics at the moment, trying to get that flexibility into the system and sort of, you know, loosen up some of those requirements a little bit when it comes to placements.
Great. So I'm now going to ask Phil. Phil is the early careers lead at Aon, to share his story around how you're approaching the lockdown and what your provision will be for the 30 students in the UK that were due to start your 9-week internship this summer. And I think Steve mentioned earlier before this webinar that you've become a bit of a star in the market in terms of being known for somebody who's a bit of a leading light here. So we're really excited to hear what you've got to say in terms of what you're doing with your internship.
Wonderful, thank you, Jane. Yes, yeah, I think we were in a lucky position where we've received a real level of senior support for our internships. So something that our global CEO Greg came out very early on to say was that he didn't want to let the students down, and that he wanted to see the program continue both in the UK and the US and Canada as well. And so across those groups, we've got about 300 interns across those different groups, about 30 in the UK, so slightly smaller portion of them, but still just as important. And what we've done is we've gone about looking at how we can really design a virtual internship program. So taking the learnings from our face-to-face program, but then taking that and looking at how that works in a virtual space. So rather than just a straight conversion, actually looking at what changes, what modifications we need to make it a really engaging experience. And it's something that we've already been working on and looking at how we can do more of our learning, more of our work in that virtual space. We've already got a strong work from home culture and more of our learning being delivered virtually in a blended way. So it's very much kind of learning from that. So a few of the things that we've done, so we had a look at the program, we've made it more project based, and that's been one of our key learnings is that we recognise that work can't necessarily continue for all of the teams in the way it would have done business as usual work that maybe required a really high degree of collaboration with people sat over a desk kind of learning and doing calculations and other activities. That perhaps doesn't lend itself in the same way as project work might in a more virtual environment. So we've moved a lot of the work to project work now, and we've created several different layers to enable us to offer flexibility to the business. So we've got a core learning layer for our program. So it's a consistent layer that all of our interns globally will go through, and there'll be core modules. It'll include for the UK our 3-day induction at the start of the program, and several weekly sessions, including story hours from some of our leaders talking about kind of the success stories that they've had with clients, and a number of other sessions that will be core. And then there'll be an optional learning layer. So using our My Learning platform, we are curating a specific intern pathway on that. We're lucky that was a new platform that we delivered last year. So actually it's very fortuitous in that respect that we've been able to take content from a variety of different places. So from Harvard, content that we already had from various different providers, and curate that pathway. And then that'll include a lot of optional training. So where students have time, where they have capacity, they'll be able to dip into that to ensure that they get the learning that they want, and in a way that's flexible around their project work. Then there'll be 2 layers of projects. So there'll be a global project or some global projects that they'll be participate in. Those will be slightly more centrally run, and we'll have more of a what we call Aon United theme, so a cross-service line theme to them. And then they'll have their business projects as well. And those projects will come from the solution line that they would have been aligned to, or are still aligned to. But one of the changes we'll make there is to make that more of a national program. So rather than perhaps having the managers who were managers, we're identifying new managers who are really behind having a virtual team to deliver this project, and we'll perhaps ignore what their locations perhaps were, and again bring that global, bring that kind of UK kind of based team together. So that's I suppose a few of the changes. Obviously, technology has been a big part of that. So we've been looking at what resources we've got available and tapping into things that perhaps we wouldn't have accessed before. So we're still using our WebEx system, but perhaps using that in a more extended way. So training our team as much as anyone else to use it properly and really use some of the interactive features, but then also using things like our bespoke My Learning platform, curating this intern pathway. That's something new that we're doing. But we've also got an app that we've used in the US before for their larger cohorts. We're now rolling that out globally. That'll allow the interns to interact. It'll allow things to be diarised in calendars. It'll allow them to share content and experiences. And then we've got a reflective video tool that would have been used for one of our other learning programs that now won't be going ahead because it included quite a significant amount of face-to-face. That's now being repurposed for us to use for this. So not necessarily spending any more money, but really looking at what resources we've got and how we could redeploy them to make this a truly kind of virtual experience.
Fab. Wow. Thank goodness for your new LMS, eh? Sounds like that's been
Absolutely.
a real core part of the solution.
Absolutely.
Have you any thoughts? So this is a really mean question because I haven't prepped it with you, Phil, but it's just a thought, you know.
That's okay.
For those that are on the call who haven't got that, are not in that fortuitous situation where they've just recently invested in a really good quality learning management system, or where it's a bit clunky and a bit old, or where the content hasn't been curated and isn't great, what sort of advice would you give to those employers that are on the call?
Absolutely. So I think although we've got that great platform, I think we've worked with our partners across kind of L&D to look at what platforms, what technology, what resources exist already in the business that we could redeploy. And that's definitely where the video tool for them to have these reflective learning, that's where that's come from. There's a great opportunity for them to create more kind of self-generated, or there's some great content kind of out there. So there's other spaces that could be used. We're also working with some of our learning partners that we've worked with before. So Smarty Train are still going to be working with us this summer. We're taking what we would have done with Saj and his team kind of in person and moving that to a virtual delivery. So still using those suppliers that we've used before. So I definitely encourage people to continue to do that. But for us, the real success has been working with that broader L&D team, so taking it outside of just early careers and making it an early careers problem. There's actually our L&D teams globally have more capacity than they would have had because some programs perhaps aren't going ahead that might have been face-to-face, or some are being made virtual, but many of them were blended learning experiences anyway. So just some elements are quieter, but also our recruitment team as well. Recruitment is slowing down a little bit for us over the summer, as it is for many organisations, while the business takes stock. So there are people there that can help us and pull that content together. So using those resources to fill that gap, it's going to be a fairly quick turnaround, but there is time. And that's been certainly for the US part of the reason we pushed the date back a little bit for the US from the beginning of June to match our date now, the 22nd of June, to give us a few more weeks.
Great. And I guess having the eyes of Greg, your CEO, on this, and it being a mandate from him, I guess, you know, you're going to have lots of people queuing up to support. Would you mind sharing us a little bit with us about you know, what his rationale was for that mandate? You mentioned earlier, you know, he didn't want to let students down, which is you know, very honourable. But what were the business imperatives behind his decision?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're definitely right. There were a number. So one of the really important things, which I think is the same with many organisations, is our intern pool are a really important source of talent ultimately for our graduate schemes. So 70+% of our interns will return onto our graduate scheme, and so we don't want to lose that source of talent. And also, actually, it's at the early careers level and right down to the internship and before. We're looking to create a really diverse pipeline of talent, and that's something that I think many organisations struggle at the more senior level. So we need to get things right at the junior levels, and I think Greg understands that. And if we said to that talent, no, we can't provide anything, or we're going to provide you something significantly watered down that might lead them to think about maybe looking at other organisations in the future, or doesn't excite them as much about joining Aon as perhaps our current opportunity might, and we could lose that talent in several different ways. So he didn't want to do that. I think it was also really important for him to be seen in the market, and for Aon to be seen in the market is still out there, still doing business, and being an organisation that was already able to work virtually anyway, and actually just taking that and upscaling it and responding to the current environment and being able to adapt to that and still deliver for its clients and still be seen to take on that talent. I think that was really important for him, both from a public and private sector perspective as well. And then I think we all recognise that although yes, there is going to be a recession, hopefully it's only going to be short and sharp, and there is going to be a big drop in GDP, but that talent's still going to be needed. And if it doesn't join us now, and we're going to want that talent now and into the future, so that brand reputation from an employer brand perspective is important. So we get, as many organisations do, far more applications than we need, but actually we often do want to go back and re-engage with that talent at later stages, so when they're perhaps part qualified or once they're qualified, and we want them to leave with a positive experience of Aon, and this is hopefully helping us deliver that.
That's fantastic, absolutely brilliant. So anybody listening who needs to be or is in the middle of writing their business case, I think there's some really useful pointers there. Steve, any questions that have come through from the audience?
Yeah, we had a few on software and platforms, but I think you went on to answer that, Phil, in terms of the stuff that you're using. We have had a couple of questions actually talking about, I think, feed off from your programs onto the graduate schemes. You mentioned that it is that feeder. And are you still going to be able to actually use this model that you've devised to still assess people and feed them onto that graduate program? Or are you going to have some other interventions when it comes to making job offers?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a slightly flexible approach. So what we do still want to assess them during the course of the internship, and I think that's still going to be a really core part of the decision making. So as part of realigning the interns to new managers or a smaller number of managers, that's going to give those managers hopefully a good comparison, even despite the fact that perhaps we may not get any face-to-face interaction, depending on how quickly we can all move back into offices and how the next few months takes us. There is a plan to have a couple of in-person days at the end of the session, and as part of that we plan to integrate some final interviews with those managers, so they do get a chance to meet face to face. Those may have to happen virtually depending on where we get to. So a slightly adapted version, but very much we still want the core of that project-based experience and the core of the work they produce and the interactions they have to form part of that decision. But I think we recognise that maybe not all managers will be in a position where they're 100% comfortable to just use that, and that's why we've also then created the addition of the final interview at the end of that, just to hopefully confirm the decision that they would make, but also enable us to get the backing and the buy-in from those leaders and managers who ultimately we want them to hire the interns at the end.
Great.
Is there anything special that you've had to do with managers to kind of get them up to speed on this program you're offering?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely very much kind of in progress on that one. So part of it is certainly for some of the managers is that realignment process. Certainly an important thing for the UK. We can put our hands around the group quite easily in the UK. So realign them to managers who are going to be enthusiastic and will want to kind of back this program and see it as a real opportunity. And part of the way we'll identify them will be kind of looking at high performers at their level who we want to give, I suppose, opportunities to kind of extend and expand their remit and challenge them as well outside of their roles, and this will be one of the ways we do that. So very much a learning opportunity for some of those managers, perhaps as well. And then we're going to be providing them with quite a lot of support and training throughout kind of the coming kind of weeks to make sure that they're engaging in the best way, and guidance on what we expect from them, the levels of interaction, how to make those interactions successful. So that, there's going to be, I suppose, support for the interns, but very much support for the managers as well. And then for I suppose that next layer up, the kind of leaders in each of our solution lines, they've got someone nominated who will be identifying how to drive the work for their area forward, and they work with us with the managers. So we already have them in place from a day-to-day perspective, and they're now just being repurposed to work on this project as well.
We've got about 300 or about 320 people on the call, so there's a mountain of questions coming through, but I think in the interest of time, we should probably crack on, Jane.
Yeah, no problem. So Clifford Chance has won a number of awards for their work experience programmes. So I've asked Yasmina to talk about their plans for their summer vacation and Sparks programmes. I believe that you're going to be using a product called Inside Sherpa, Yasmina, so it'd be great to hear a bit more detail about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give a little bit of context, so we typically run schemes over the course of a month during the summer, starting in June, and we have 2 Spark schemes that run for a week each. Spark is for first years or second years of a 4-year course and is very much focused on providing an insight into a career in the law. So there's quite a lot of classroom-based learning and then opportunities for work shadowing as well. The vacation scheme, traditional in the law, there's a little bit of classroom-based learning and then the rest of the time spent work shadowing in the practice areas. So we decided to go virtual again, sort of honouring that commitment to students, providing them those development opportunities that we really wanted them to have, enabling them to build their networks. And for us, it's an opportunity to build that emotional contract, again, touching on what Phil was saying about brands, and also continuing to have a way to assess the candidate. So we decided that we'd move to a 3-day virtual programme with 2 days of optional work shadowing. So for Spark candidates, it's pretty much unchanged. Their usual experience, which would be 3 days of classroom-based and then going off into the practice areas, is exactly the same, apart from the timings are slightly different. And obviously the classroom-based learning will take place virtually now. So they've got those 3 days in the summer and then 2 days of optional work shadowing in December, later on in the year, where we hope all of this will have calmed down. And then for the vacation scheme, it's a slightly bigger change. So it is reducing the length of the vacation scheme, but we think we'll still be able to offer what it is that the students want, which is an ability to get an insight into our organisation, to figure out if it's for them, for us to see whether they will want to join us, and to make sure that we're giving them lots of opportunities to learn. And the way we're framing it, I mean, I think for students, actually, it's quite helpful. So we've got a virtual pre-scheme social that will be happening before the virtual scheme, which is going to have a lot of hints and tips on how to make the most of the virtual experience and what to do afterwards, because they'll obviously now have this gap between doing the 3-day virtual scheme and then coming back and coming into the firm for their work shadowing. So I think actually that's a great opportunity for them to make the most of that period, and try and secure that training contract offer after the work shadowing element. So the way that our scheme is running for the 3 days, we luckily were already in talks with Inside Sherpa, so it meant that the process could be quite quick at our end, in terms of making a decision that this was the strategy that we were going to take. So a 3-day scheme, a lot of what we had already planned content-wise is going to still take place. Again, not massively differing from the ways we usually assess candidates. So we'll be able to have case study sessions where students are set a case study from a presenter who talks them through a particular business issue, and they then get given a task and they'll be able to present back on that, whether they're working individually or in groups. All of that will still be happening over the platform. So everything happens in one portal using Inside Sherpa, and there will be some sessions which are compulsory, so everyone has to attend. They all click into the same thing. There are some aspects which will be more bespoke. So one of the things that we do leading up to our schemes, when we're collecting all the relevant information we need in order to set them up on payroll and things like that, is we ask them, if you could design one session for the scheme, what would it be? Obviously, we get a ton of different answers and then usually seek to design one session. Actually, this is giving us greater flexibility. So because we can host a number of different sessions at any one time, we can allow students to go into different breakout rooms and sign up for the sessions that most interest them. So there's an extra element of being able to make the scheme bespoke, which I think is another great opportunity. It also means, because all vacation schemers and Spark students are doing the same one scheme, that actually we can split them off into groups. So we'll have Spark specific sessions, we'll have vacation scheme specific sessions, with some of the ones that are useful for everyone, again, will be compulsory. And yeah, so there's room for virtual Q&As, there are breakout rooms, there's a self-reflection tool, which I think we're definitely going to be using to help us to assess candidates. So at the end of the day, students, talk about how they've performed on the project, and what their own reflections are, how they found the day, what they particularly engaged with. So lots of things that we can do to the platform. We can also have people upload the work that they're completing onto the platform, and have people at our end, so fee earners in the business, reviewing that and almost marking their work to provide feedback. And that again can all happen through the platform. So we're quite excited. And I've touched on a couple of the opportunities. One of the things as well that Jane had asked me to touch on was assessment, and how this might change the way that we assess candidates. And again, I think actually we're managing to keep it fairly consistent with what we've done in previous years. So typically we'd obviously graduate recruitment with feedback on the students, so looking at their engagement throughout the scheme. We're able to do that using this platform because actually we can get statistics around students' engagement, so what sessions they're logging on to, how engaged they are, how much time they're spending on them. So that's something we can use, which will be really helpful. Supervisor feedback, typically something we go off, so we'll be able to have that through the work shadowing, which is still continuing to offer in December. And then we'll always set them projects as well, which is obviously something we're going to do through the platform, and then assess their projects and give them feedback on those. So everything is designed with the aim of giving the students as much value as we possibly can. So helping them to learn and understand our business, what it is we do, and help to differentiate us from our competitors when they're making the decisions about where they want to, spend their future years and build their career. But also allowing us to have that element of assessment. And then one thing that we always do as well is have conversion interviews. So at the end of the scheme, we'll have partner conversion interviews. So it's a shorter version of what would happen on an assessment day, but just figuring out, is Clifford Chance definitely a place for you? Do you know that this is where you want to be? Looking at how they performed on the scheme, and then deciding whether or not they're ready for that training contract offer at that stage. So that's a sort of whistle-stop tour of what we're doing, but I hope that summarised some of the things that people wanted to know.
Fab, thank you, Yasmina, that's great. I guess we were chatting yesterday around when you're making that decision around going virtual or not, to run or not, or to defer, there's so many different sort of cogitations that go around organisations, and I think for an organisation like Clifford Chance, you're using your internships and your summer vac schemes for a number of reasons. Yes, to build pipeline for the future, absolutely, but it's also about giving the candidate the opportunity to decide whether or not your firm is right for them too. So that's what I think you were talking about in terms of that sort of emotional connection or emotional contract between the two sides. And I think it's interesting, isn't it, that you've gone for a solution which has allowed you to put everything in one place and then give students an experience of the full brand of Clifford Chance within that one space. I think that must have been, that will stand you in good stead, particularly when there are other firms, not just in your sector, but in other sectors, who are making a decision not to go down this virtual route and to either not go ahead at all or to postpone. I think it gives you a great brand advantage, potentially.
Yeah, I think so. And I do think as well, it depends, the approach that firms take depends on what the purpose of their vacation schemes are. So with us, with Spark, it was incredibly clear that we needed to move it virtual and that we needed to maintain the experience, because it is so much about learning, about development, and about, creating that emotional bond with the firm. Because if they get an offer, they've still got, sometimes up to 4 years before they even start with us. During that period, of course, after getting an offer, they can go and do vacation schemes elsewhere. They might well get offers elsewhere. So for us, that is really important with Spark. So it was a no-brainer when it came to Spark. With the vacation scheme, I think firms take completely different approaches, and what you decide to do is depending on, what your vacation scheme is a vehicle for. If it's a vehicle for learning and development, and maybe an additional layer of assessment, because you assess at a slightly different level of who should get onto a vacation scheme and who should get a training contract, then I think it's important to retain some element of what you would have done previously, which is what we've done. If your vacation scheme is predominantly a tool to market your firm, and you have selected people to go on your vacation scheme who could have got a training contract offer straight away, then you can make TC offers directly. I think it just completely depends, and for a lot of firms it will be some sort of blend, which I'd say is probably the case for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that's a good link into Liz and the conversation that we'll have around professional services and the Big Four. But before I move on to Liz, are there any specific questions that around the legal sector and what they're doing?
Yeah, I had a few. One of them, a few questions actually, asking various questions around paying the students, Yasmina. So yeah, it's kind of like how you're rewarding them, and how do you kind of get to those decisions around what you do pay these students?
Yeah, so we are honouring our commitment to pay them. So for Spark, they're getting paid exactly what they would have done otherwise. So £350 for the week. We're paying it in 2 tranches. So we're paying them pro rata. So for everyone who does the 3 days, they get that in one sum in July. And then for everyone who, because the work shadowing is optional, who does it in December, they'll get paid for the days they do in December. For the vacation scheme, because it's shorter now, they're still getting paid the same weekly sum, but it's no longer a 2-week scheme. But again, the same applies. They get paid for attending the virtual segment, and then get paid for doing the work shadowing.
A few people missed which platform you said you were using as well, I think. Do you mind just sort of repeating that for them?
Yeah, so we're using Inside Sherpa.
Got it, okay. Yes, I've heard a few law firms using Inside Sherpa. That name's come up a little bit. A couple of questions actually asking around socials and culture of the organisation. So in that kind of 3-day window, how are you planning to incorporate that into your programme?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we have got various networking sessions taking place. So we've got various people we're signing up from the business who are going to be sort of surprise networkers. So we're going to tell everyone in advance. Everyone will get swapped around. You don't know who you're going to be networking with. And we've got various people from our graduate recruitment partner committee. We've got the managing partner. We've got some people from international offices who've agreed to come in to get that sort of networking element with people who are fairly senior in the business, because that's obviously something they would have had access to through networking lunches and things at the firm. We're also still having a virtual pre-scheme social, as I mentioned earlier. And the hope will be that at some point we will be able to have a mass gathering and meet with everyone. If that can't happen between now and December, then we always have offer drinks, usually around February time of every year. So it might well have to wait then, but we'd hope that we can have an in-person engagement with everyone as well.
Right, thanks. As before, Jane, there's a whole load of questions, so I'm trying to pick out key themes. So I think we'll be here till tea time if we go through them all. Okay. One thing just to say, I am capturing screenshots of the questions, so I will circulate them to the panelists afterwards, so we can get some of them back answered another way. We'll try and do that.
Thanks, Steve. Great. So the Big Four make up a significant number of the ISE intern numbers, so it'd be really good to hear how EY are looking to approach their 300 6-week summer interns, and what are we going to do with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as you said, it would normally be 6 weeks long, approximately 300 interns joining us across the firm, across the UK. And our approach and our plan is to run a shortened virtual experience. So from the beginning, I think there was a real feeling that we should still be offering something to our candidates. There's a feeling of kind of duty of care to them, and a feeling of trying to support, the first step that they're taking in their career journey, and not remove that entirely. So, as I've said, our plan, a shorter virtual experience, and I think like some of the other panelists have said, really, that will be framed around, the usual principles that we'd hope they would gain in an internship, you know, if they were in the office with us. So that's an exposure, obviously, to the role that they'd be completing and the type of work they'll be doing, and meeting the team and getting an exposure to the culture there, and understanding of the firm as a whole as well. So that's key, and we'll be designing parts of our program that allow them to do that, from, you know, piece of project work that they might be doing, to insight sessions, to lunch and learns, all those sorts of things that you can still run virtually. Other elements, you know, keen for us to ensure that we get networking in there. So, you know, like some of the suggestions we've heard on the panel, you know, quizzes and lunch and learns, and also maybe a virtual office tour if we can do that. So things like that that really give them a flavour of, you know, the sorts of people they'll be meeting and working with in the future on their graduate scheme. So that networking piece was key. And I think also that the learning, so there will be structured learning as part of the programme, that we'll utilise and work really closely with our learning and development teams internally that have been absolutely, you know, great support for us in thinking this through. But also because we'll give them access to our learning platforms, you know, have access to a wealth of different types of learning that, you know, they can use for self-directed learning time as well. So we're hoping that, you know, virtually we can still offer, you know, many of the elements they would expect, you know, if they're in the office with us on the internship, but that we do that in a shortened way over a virtual offering. Yeah.
Great. And I guess, you know, with such large numbers, that decision can't have been taken lightly, Liz. So would you be open to sharing, you know, what were your options at the very beginning of this journey, and how did you frame your business case?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, from the beginning, leadership were really keen that we still did offer something. However, we, you know, went through the business case with our talent board, and on, you know, the options on the table were, you know, kind of the reality of if we remove something entirely and what's the impact of that on our brand potentially, and the future talent that we you know really need from the back of the programme. And, you know, obviously also the option of fast tracking candidates to 2021 roles, and laying out the recommendation that, you know, I've just talked through, that we were also really keen as a talent function to make sure that we were offering as well. So in that business case, it was, you know, listing all the options, the impact of each, the costs of each, thinking about the logistics. So I think, Helen, you mentioned about getting all the tech out to everybody. You know, that's in no mean feat. So we're thinking all of that through, but also things like onboarding. You know, can we deliver a good onboarding experience for them? Can we get all the documentation and, you know, right to work proof and all that sort of stuff ahead of them actually joining? So in our business case, you know, it was kind of all the considerations that we need to take as a business, and, you know, the limiting factors potentially as well. I think what also went into it was an outline of kind of how we hope the week will really add value, and how, you know, an intern could come away feeling like, I understand, you know, the business, I understand the role I'd be doing, and I feel, you know, a link to this firm and I'd want to work with them in future, you know. And I think what we would usually do is assess candidates through their performance over a 6-week placement. However, we've taken the view that this experience probably won't give us enough to make a fair decision. So we'll be having a final interview in place of making that call as a result of their kind of experience with us.
And how have the students reacted to that, Liz? What's the feedback on that been so far?
So like really positively to begin with. I think we're working through at the moment kind of exactly communicating with everybody to confirm. But yeah, I think the initial reaction has been positive. I think, like we've heard earlier, I think students are generally hoping that they'll get something out of the summer, you know, and we were very committed to ensuring that that start in their career is still a positive one for this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Any questions from the audience for Liz, Steve?
Yeah, and this question actually has been posed by a few people, some of the other panelists as well, just haven't been able to get it in. So I know you've got quite a big school programme, Liz, at EY. Are you just really thinking about graduates with this kind of work, or is there anything you think that you or you know of other employers that can offer to that kind of that school population?
Yeah, so we run a smaller Year 12 programme, and that would usually be 1 week anyway. We are looking at running a shorter virtual experience for them. I think for those programmes, obviously the support element and the pastoral care element is really key. So just wanting to make sure that a virtual experience can still offer that, whilst also, you know, giving them exposure to the sort of role that they might go on to on an apprenticeship or a school leaver programme as well. So I'd say, you know, schools are crying out for work experience, aren't they? And the students still, you know, really want that exposure and that experience. So, but I think it's just thinking carefully about how you offer that in a supportive way and a supportive environment for the younger age group.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything around the sort of...
We haven't...
Go right then, carry on. It's okay.
I was just saying, I think the same conversation could be had around diversity and inclusion initiatives. So clearly, you know, there are other extenuating circumstances that need to be taken into account if you're thinking about taking your programmes that are aimed at various different diverse groups into account. But I think one of the things we've heard today is that there's so much opportunity within our organisations to provide content through lots of different platforms, that actually it would be a real shame for our market if we were to completely discount running those types of programmes in some sort of format during this crisis.
Yes, there's been quite a few questions on the D&I piece, and I don't know, Liz, is that something you've been able to think about? So hardware, you know, software, get access to data, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so the piece around, you know, hardware, absolutely appreciate that, you know, not everybody will have access to, you know, the technology that they need. So we are working to make sure that everyone gets access to a laptop that we can provide them with. And particularly that would be the case at school age. So, you know, I think whatever we end up running there, I think we will, you know, we'll have that as an offering. Like if somebody needs that additional tech, we can provide it to them. So that's very much our opinion on that, that, you know, we need to enable everybody to be able to have the same experience and the same tech to be able to do that.
Great. Thank you. I'm just aware of time. We've got one more panelist that we need to squeeze in the next 6 minutes. So we're going to say bye to Liz and let Tonya step in, I think. Hi, Tonya. Are you there?
Hi.
Hi. So thank you for joining us, Tonya. So in terms of employers who are in the audience, who are looking to make decisions around virtual internships, what would you say to those employers trying to represent the student perspective?
I think, you know, there's great things going on, particularly listening to Yasmina talking about the virtual internships with Inside Sherpa that I know that has been going on for some time. And I know that Ollie and the team at RMP are partnering with Inside Sherpa to provide more of that. But I think from the students that I've spoken to, there's some of them that are going through particularly difficult situations in that, for example, there was one student I spoke to this morning who's trying to do his work from a bedroom with 2 other siblings in that room. So being able to have that fully immersive experience and really focus is going to prove quite challenging outside of potential tech issues. And I think also for students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, building social capital through developing some of these personal relationships through face-to-face interactions is quite critical to their future careers and kind of future opportunities. And we know also, obviously, that students that undertake these opportunities, universities really do encourage them to do so, because we know it has a positive impact on the attainment gap, on their confidence and their aspirations, potential degree classification results, and also in turn graduate outcomes. So, you know, as Helen mentioned earlier, that face-to-face element really does help in terms of the skills development piece. I think what I would encourage from an employer's perspective is to just try where possible to add that personal touch, even if it's like a check-in call, for example, you know, not necessarily to provide all the pastoral care that students are used to, but there's just some students that I think feel potentially really isolated, especially if they don't have networks outside of the home. So it's more difficult for them to be able to really get involved in the virtual experience, to ask questions, to have somebody there that normally in a face-to-face situation they would be able to say, can I just ask you a question? Whereas kind of the technology bit now has almost created an additional barrier for them, which is then going to have obviously unintended consequences. I can't hear. Oh.
I muted too. We've lost you, Jane. Can we hear you?
Is that better?
There you go. You're back on. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask Tonya, before we all sign off, what is there anything else from the other panelists that you noted from a student perspective that you wanted to share?
That I wanted to share. Well, I think some of the stuff that Helen was mentioning around you know, kind of maintaining what they've done in previous years, I think is really good. I think what I would say is that there needs to be a bit more communication with students, and I'm sure you are doing that, Helen, but just from employers in general, I think it's the unknown. That students know we're all in the same situation and that things are happening, but I think it's just more communicating with them, even if the decision hasn't been made around, you know, we'll keep them in the loop as much as we can. But, you know, I think there's great things going on, and it's just being mindful of some of these unintended consequences, I think. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Well, we're coming to the end now, I think, Steve. So I just wanted to say two final things really before we go. Well, three actually. The first one is around, we've got so many questions. I can see them coming through from Steve, so huge amounts of questions which we haven't had a chance to cover off. So I'm going to take it offline with Steve, and we'll come back with a solution around how we can handle some of those questions. It might be that we just come to you guys as a panel and get them uploaded onto the ISE website. It may even be that we run a follow-up to this, so question mark. So that's my first action. My second action is to offer anybody that's on the call the opportunity to see a demo. There's been quite a lot of technology mentioned on this call today, Inside Sherpa being one, lots of the sort of you know, enterprise-wide technology that's out there that we're all using ourselves in our day-to-day jobs, but being adapted for virtual internships. But this opportunity to put something all in one place and have a great branded employer brand experience is something that Henry and the team at 106 have been working on. So if anybody wants a demo of the actual solution that Henry's been working on, then feel free to get in contact with me, Jane at 106comms.com, or Henry at 106comms.com, sorry. And then finally, a huge amount of thanks to everybody that's participated this afternoon. We had some pre-calls to talk about this, so it's not just your time today. I appreciate it. It's also the pre-calls that we had. So I very much appreciate it, especially at the moment when you must have inboxes that are like this, trying to deal with everything. So all the very best for the next few weeks in your planning and preparation. And it'd be great to hear how you get on and how it's all working, and to get some student feedback. I think it'll be really exciting. I'm really looking forward to hearing that. So thank you very much, everybody.
Yes, and a thank you from me. So thank you for all your time, echoing what Jane said, and also thank you, Jane, for pulling all this together, and thank you to you all as panelists for your candour and sharing what you're doing. It's been very helpful. Like I said, there's a mountain of questions coming through that I've been screen capturing and we'll ping over. Just a final reminder from me, as I said, we've been recording this webinar, so if there's bits you missed, things you want to go back on, you want to share it with people, you will automatically get a follow-on link from us that comes from the software. with a version of this where you can go and download it. We'll also put it onto our archive, and also just keep an eye out for all the rest of the stuff that we're putting out from the ISE. You know, we recognise the difficult situation we're all in. These are challenging times, both for lots of people personally and also from an organisational point of view. So we're putting out roughly 2 to 3 webinars a week at the moment, trying to do a couple of podcasts. And we've done research already, and we've got more coming down the line. So please do keep going to the website and reading your newsletters, because I'm sure you'll find lots more useful information there. And if there's anything you think we aren't covering, please ping me an email, let me know, and we will rectify that. So take care, everybody. Thanks again once to all the panelists, and see you all virtually if I don't talk to you all soon. So stay safe. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Right.